So this is section 14.1, exponents. There's just a couple things that we need to go over as far as terms and definitions. All right, so what I need you to do is fill in each term, all right, and we'll talk about them in just a second. Okay, a power is a product of repeated factors. So that's really another word for exponent, really. Okay, and then you have exponent, which basically tells you how many times to multiply the base by itself. Then you have the base, which is the repeated factor. So let me give you an example. All right, let's take 3. All right, 3 to the second power. 3 is my base. Okay, that's the number that's going to be multiplied by itself. In the exponent, so you'll want to write this just off to the side in your notes. The exponent is what tells you how many times it's being multiplied. Okay, so this is 3 times 3, which we know is what? 9. Okay, 3 times 3 is 9. All right, any questions about base, exponent, anything? All right, now we need to talk about the parentheses. The parentheses matter when we're evaluating powers with negative bases. So let's go back to our base of 3. If we made it -3 to the second power or -3 to the second power, what is the only difference between these two terms?
One is negative and one isn't.
Nope.
One, you're doing it to the power, one, you're just multiplying it.
Nope. And Miles said your second answer was right. One of them has parentheses and the other one doesn't. Both of them are still -3 to the second power. But here's the difference, okay? On the first one, when the base is negative and it's in parentheses, it means -3 times -3, okay? Which, what is -3 times -3? 9, okay? Now, when it's not in parentheses, that means no matter how many times the repeated multiplication is, my answer will be negative. It means this. Negative, again, no matter what's being multiplied, your answer is going to be negative. 3 times 3. So essentially what you're doing is you're evaluating the exponent as if the negative is not even there. And then, okay, so what's 3 times 3? 9, and it's negative. It's negative. So when the base is negative and it is not in parentheses, the answer will be negative every time. Okay? Now, that's new, so that might take you a couple times to practice. All right, so example 1. In example 1, all we're doing is writing the repeated factors as powers. You have a section like this on your homework. We're not evaluating anything. All we're doing is we're recognizing the repeated multiplication and writing it as a power. So look at the first problem. -7 times -7 times -7. What do you notice about each term? It's in parentheses. Okay, so that means when you write the product needs to be in parentheses. To the third power. I want you to do x. Go ahead and do x. Hey, what's x, guys? Kayla, what's x going to be? X to the... Yes, x to the 5th power. Very good, because it repeats 5 times. Now, on the next one, we see different terms repeating. So that doesn't mean that we smush them all together and say to the 5th power. How many times does pi repeat? That's just a symbol. How many times does it repeat? 3. So I would say pi to the 3rd power. Okay? And then how many times does r repeat? 2. So you say r to the 2nd power. Here's what's important. We don't put a dot in between them. We don't put an x. We don't put parentheses. We just put them together. And if I could pinpoint like one mistake that I just scratched my head on that I could not figure out why it kept happening, it's this. Because the tendency to put the dot there, for whatever reason, it's hard to get some students away from that. But we don't need to put a dot. Okay, we just write them together and it shows multiplication. All right, I want you to try 1/3. Go ahead and do 1/3 and write it as a power. Okay, go ahead and do 1/3 and write it as a power. Isaiah, what would it be?
1/3 to the fourth power.
1/3 to the fourth power. Okay, do I need to put it in parentheses? No. The only time I need to use parentheses is when I have a negative base that is already in parentheses. Okay? All right. Anybody, any takers on the next one? 0.3. Xavier, what do you think on the next one?
0.3 to the third power.
Okay. And then what?
To the second power.
Yeah, wait, what?
X to the second.
Yes, x to the second power. Any dots in between?
No.
Guys, no dots in between. All right. Anybody else get that on your papers? Did you guys get that? Okay, so now look at the last one. It's very similar to the first problem that we did, except there's something that's different about where the negative is. You guys see that? So now the actual factor that's repeating, is that negative? 7 and 7 and 7? No. So I write that 7 to the third power. Hold on, let me change my color. All right, so I write it 7 to the third power, and then I bring down my negative. Okay? You see the difference? That negative means that my answer is negative regardless, but the actual base that's being raised, I just say 7 to the third power, and then I bring down my negative. Negative 7 to the third power. All right? Are you starting to kind of catch on to the difference of when the negative is actually attached to the base and when it's not? Example 2. Okay, so in example 2, we're evaluating expressions now. So now we're actually coming up with an answer. All right, so here's where we're going to stress that there is no calculator usage in this chapter. All right, because if you use a calculator to evaluate an exponent, you're actually not doing any of the mental work to get there. All right, and you can't prove that you understand exponents when you have a calculator in your hand doing all the work for you. Okay, so that's why showing your work is very beneficial for you. Now, I will say this on the evaluating. On a quiz or a test, I'm not going to take off if you don't have work, because some of you will have these memorized by the time we get to a quiz or a test, like negative 2 to the fourth power. For now, we're going to write the repeated. So if it's negative 2 to the fourth power, and notice negative 2 is in parentheses, that means the negative 2 is repeating multiplication. Negative 2 times negative 2, and you want each one of them to be in parentheses. Okay, so here's what it would look like. All right, the repeated multiplication looks like this. Negative 2 times negative 2. You need to write this in your notes. All right, and now I apply my rules for multiplying negative numbers. How many negatives do I have? 4. So because of that, my even-odd rule says my answer is
16.
Positive or negative?
Oh, positive.
Positive. And now, yes, 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8 times 2 is 16. And that's my answer. Okay? So on a quiz or a test, I'm not taking off if you don't have this. Okay? However, at least for now, it's really helpful if you put that so you can visually see. All right, now I want you to do 12 to the second power. Go ahead and evaluate that. All right, write the repeated multiplication and then write the answer. 12 squared is what? 144. That's not 12 times 2. That's 12 times 12. All right, now let's do negative 2 to the fourth. I want you to write it, okay, based on what we just saw in example 1, how would I write this showing the repeated multiplication? I'm not saying negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. There's another way that I write this. Does anybody know? It was written the other way in the last slide. Isaiah?
Negative and then parentheses.
Yes.
2 times 2 times 2 times.
Yes, 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 yes. Did you get that?
Yeah.
Okay, so the negative, when it's not in parentheses, it means actually 2 to the fourth power. and then my answer is negative 16. Do you see the difference?
Yes.
Okay, so again, that's going to take some kind of mentally training your brain to look at that. All right, now let's talk about raising a fraction to an exponent. That still means, because it's in parentheses, negative 1/6 times negative 1/6 times negative 1/6. All right, and we know when we multiply fractions, I ran out of room, but we multiply all our numerators. What's 1 times 1 times 1?
1.
It's okay. I do it too. It's 1. And what's 6 times 6 times 6?
No.
It's 120, 216.
Yes, 216. Now, guys, listen, we're going to talk about perfect squares more on Monday, but 6 to the third power is something that we're actually going to end up memorizing. But for now, actually, we're not talking about it until the next, I don't remember. We'll talk about perfect squares at some point. So 6 to the third power is 216. And then my answer is negative because I multiplied 3 negatives together, and that's an odd number, so my answer is negative. Okay, negative 1 over 216. How are we doing? Okay, so example 3 now uses order of operations. So order of operations means the PEMDAS. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Evaluate what's in parentheses, then exponents, multiply and divide left to right, add and subtract left to right. So based on that, what do I do first on the first problem? Someone raise your hand and tell me. Somebody new, okay? So I got my quiet ones in the class. Anybody new? You tell me, what am I going to do first? Sarah? Okay, the exponent. So 3 to the 4th power. Can anybody raise your hand and tell me? This is another one that you very well could have memorized by the time we get to the test. What is 3 to the 4th power? What is 3 to the 4th power, Gabe?
108.
Close, but no. Sarah? It is 81. Okay. Now, if you're struggling with that, what's 3 times 3? 9. What's 9 times 3? 27. Then off to the side, do 27 times 3. Carry your 2, and you get 81. Okay, so you might need to do a little bit of work by hand until you have it memorized. But I almost guarantee you, a lot of you will have that memorized. Okay, so 3 plus 2 times 81. I must follow order of operations. Xavier, what's next? Multiply. What's 2 times 81?
162.
162. And what's 3 plus 162? Yes, 165. Okay, now I wanted to see how many of you can get through the steps on the next one. We've got a couple exponents, then we have some subtraction and division. All right, I'm going to walk around and just check up on you guys real quick.
It's different.
Yes, I want you to change your exponents. I actually am not sure how, because I literally copied the PowerPoint into Word. I have no idea how they got changed, other than, I don't know, maybe somehow. So anyway, go ahead and change them on your notes to match the screen. So 3 to the 3rd power and 8 to the 2nd power. Thank you for bringing that up. What is 3 to the 3rd power? 27 minus, what's 8 squared? 64 divided by 2. So what do I do next? Kyle, what am I going to do next? What's my next step, do you think? Yeah, very good. Divide. Guys, what's 64 divided by 2? 32. So now 27 minus 32. Negative 5. Negative 5. Did anybody get negative 5? Or maybe you were on track to get negative 5? Okay, so just following our order of operations rules. I want you to, now on the next one, I want you to simplify what's inside the parentheses. Go ahead and simplify what's inside the parentheses. What did you write for negative 10 squared?
Negative 100.
Is it 100 or negative 100? It is negative. Why?
It's not in parentheses.
There's no parentheses. There's no, well, you say, well, yes, there is. There's one right over here. No, that parentheses means the whole thing is in parentheses. If negative 10 was in parentheses, there would be another set of parentheses. Okay, so because it's not in parentheses, again, it's like saying, no, there is no negative here. It's 10 squared, which is 100, and then it's negative. So this is actually negative 3 times negative 100 plus 70. And what's negative 100 plus 70? Negative 30. Negative 3 times negative 30 is positive 90. Okay? You see how that can skew your answer real quick. Okay? So that's what we need to pay attention to. So based on what we just said, I want you to evaluate what's inside our absolute value bars. It's been a while since we've talked about absolute value. Just simplify what's inside, and then we'll talk about absolute value. All right, did you get what is negative 3 to the third power?
27.
Negative 27. Okay, so again, that negative, I just say 3 to the third power, and then I automatically make my answer negative. So negative 27 divided by 27 is what? Negative 1. Okay, and absolute value. Can anybody tell me what does absolute value mean, Zach?
Like what the numbers were. Like if it was negative 27, absolute value would be 27.
Very good. So it's how many units it is from 0. I don't care if it's positive or negative. Absolute value has no sign. It's just the number. Okay, so that's what absolute value means. We're going to stop there. We have one more example, but we're going to go ahead and stop here and cover that another time. So that's everything you need to know for 14.1.